cultures or different dress or different hairstyles, it's not an accurate reflection, and you're really not teaching anything. That's not really very helpful. One of the things that I think is really important, if you're looking at fiction and nonfiction, is that you really have to express the complexity of a culture and the complexity of a person, whether that person is a fictional character or whether that, you're talking about the complexity of a historical situation. There's many sides, there's many actors, and you want to make sure that everybody gets to be is an actor, and everybody is expressing, has a complex opinion. And I think that's really important, is nothing is everybody is, again, like a complex actor, and you don't have certain characters or certain aspects being passive, certain characters being active, that type of thing. That's another thing to watch for. We had also talked about, one of the things that we had also talked about was everybody looking the same. So if you're depicting a particular culture where everybody looks exactly the same, no different facial features, no different, again, it's the complexity. Every person is complex, every culture is complex, and that has to come through.
Yeah, I was going to say, follow up on that. I think that is a big concern, is if sometimes you might have what's considered decent depiction representation of one group, but then their enemy in the book is depicted as one person equals this entire other group. That was criticism for a couple of literary adaptations. Dances with Wolves was criticized for that. So was the other one that, it's a great movie, Last of the Mohicans. Oh, yeah. The remake where there was like one negative person was standing in place of an entire other culture. So I think those are things to be concerned about, as we do have to remember, as Joyce said, these are large, dynamic cultural groups, and no single individual should be thought or depicted as representing the entirety of that group. That's an issue that Native writers are often confronted with when they're asked, right, are you the spokesperson for your tribe? And most every single one that I've read any sort of interview or commentary from a contemporary Native writer, they know absolutely no way, shape, or form am I ever going to say that I am the representative for my tribe. There are very few people that would feel comfortable saying that I represent the official viewpoints of my tribe that are contemporary writers. The writers that I've read in interviews and things like that, they all go out of their way to say, when it comes down to it, I'm a member of this tribal community, and I believe in a lot of the important things that this community believes in, but when it comes down to it, I'm an individual author. I'm depicting things from my imagination. I am not the cultural spokesperson. And I'm a little bit hesitant when I'm looking at books to see if it's kind of depicted as, it's set up to teach you a cultural lesson. Okay, is this person a cultural insider or not? Because if they're not, they oftentimes end up doing more of a disservice than if they hadn't written anything. In some cases, you'd be better served never having picked up the book than getting misinformation about a group. Sure.
So you got some books in front of you. Should we talk about them?
We do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Books in libraries.
Books in libraries. What do you think?
One book that I brought in, it's a pretty good book, and actually at least one of the authors, I forget, Doris Seal and Beverly Slappin, I should look in the back. One or both of these are former librarians.
Oh.
And this is a really good book because it has reviews of different children's books all the way through young adult books on different themes or subject areas. And then it has, it has like a topical essay, and then it has reviews of individual books. And a lot of the reviews are by Native American writers or Native American professors in different subject areas. And so this is one of the books that I think is a useful one for kind of identifying, like you were talking about, not that there's a checklist, but what are some criteria you should be concerned about if you don't know a lot about this particular subject area, Native American literature, and you want to be culturally aware, sensitive, but you're trying to identify what are some things I should look at or what are some things I should make sure my students are looking at. This is one book that will help you with that for sure.
And we'll make sure that we get a list of these sources and put them on our course site. So it's called A Broken Flute. Thank you. What do you have there, Joyce?
Well, I pulled out this one because it's actually by the same authors. So it's
Sleepin' and
Seal.
And Seal. And it's actually set up in a very similar fashion to the book that Joe just described. And then at the end, it has a section, and this essay may actually be in the book that Joe described as
How
well.
to Tell the Difference.
How to Tell the Difference. And it goes through a list, and some of the things are things that we've mentioned here, how to look for stereotypes, how to look at particular picture books. But what I think is nice in particular about this book is it will give you an example of a good and maybe not so good. So it will say, are there racist adjectives? Are there insulting overtones to the language? And then it'll give you a paragraph that suggests something that may have that. And then it'll say, or is the language respectful? And then it'll give you a paragraph of respectful language. Examples of pictures, of illustrations that might be better than others. So that's what I think is really nice about this particular section, is that it really does give you very concrete examples. So if you're not quite sure what it means to encourage children to believe that, are American Indians active in the story? Are they passive or are they active? Well, if you're not really sure how to identify that, this will give you an example of both.
Fantastic. I see these could two bibliographic sources could definitely be used for collection development, for programming. I mean, lots of connections there for those.
It helps, like what Joyce mentioned earlier. Certainly, there's still some of the small publishers like Selena Press and some of these other ones that are out there and publishing things. They publish primers on Navajo English language learning for young kids and things like that. And it's really good. These books identify some of those really small press titles, and if nothing else in terms of librarians and collection development stuff, it really can help you identify some of the smaller publishers out there, because I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about this. It is still probably the exception rather than the rule that a native children's book will be published by a big publisher.
Wow.
There are a few authors that have definitely broken through and they can get their things published, no matter what they write. Sherman Alexie, for example, he can write whatever he wants right now, which is great. But there are a lot of other writers, including really well-established native adult fiction writers, that if they wanted to come out with a children's book, well, their publishing company doesn't do children's books.
Right.
So they've got to go somewhere else.
So the exception rather than a rule. Small presses is probably a really good place to go for identifying and locating quality literature in this area. What else you got?
Well, Joe had mentioned Selena Press, so
Okay.
I went ahead and pulled out a book that we do have from Selena Press, and that's out of Flagstaff.
Okay.
And that's one of the nice things now with the internet is a lot of times it used to be difficult to purchase the books from the small press. It was harder to get. They would take longer, that type of thing. But most of the small presses, it's very easy, or at least it's fairly easy at this point, to be able to purchase books online. So this is a nice example. Bringer of the Dawn is a book that's written by a young woman who is Navajo, and the illustrations are also done by a Navajo gentleman. So it's a nice story, and that's Selena Press. So
Great.
that's why I pulled that
Selena
out.
Press.
Yes,
What
Selena
else?
Press.
What else do we have?
The
Show
other
and tell
things-
time.
Yeah, the other things I pulled out, and some of this was just to highlight some of the type of collections that we have here in the Labriola Center, so if anyone's interested. But I did pull out the American Indian Library Association, two of their 2008 winners.
Yes.
Book Award winners, and it is Sherman Alexie, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, and Counting Coup, the Joseph Medicine Crow book. So
One is nonfiction and the other is fiction, right?
Right. So to get a couple of examples of award-winning books. And then another book that's actually was favorably reviewed in the Through Indian Eyes, the first book that we had talked about, was Navajo ABC. So there are a lot of culturally appropriate books that deal with the alphabet, and so we had talked about.
So you don't need to simplify the culture to write a picture book.
Yeah.
Would you say that's a rule of thumb?